Social media discourse today resembles a public battle between generations. Baby boomers face accusations of wealth, hoarding, and resistance to change. Millennials and Gen Z voice concerns about burnout, economic pressure, and delayed futures. Between these groups sits Generation X, born roughly 1965 to 1980. Observing without fanfare, they are the forgotten middle child of American generational history. Too young for the economic prosperity boomers inherited, too old for the sympathy extended to younger generations. Most overlook them until systems fail and repair becomes necessary. Because Gen X didn't become invisible by accident. They were trained to disappear. And when you grow up learning that nobody's coming to save you, it doesn't just shape your lifestyle. It rewires your personality. The defining image of Gen X childhood was not a family meal, but a house key on a string around a child's neck. American families transformed during the 1970s and 80s. Divorce rates climbed. Two-income households became standard. More women entered the workforce, advancing society, but creating an unresolved childcare gap. Millions of children became latchkey kids. School ended at 3:12. The bus dropped them at empty houses. No voices, no footsteps, just refrigerator hum and yesterday's dinner smell. They prepared their own food, completed homework with television background noise, and treated injuries without assistance. Fear and loneliness had no outlet. Psychologists termed this benign neglect. Not abuse, but emotional unsupervision within physical safety. This environment wired neural pathways in specific patterns. 80-year-olds learning that help was not automatic, internalized brutal lessons early. Comfort required earning or became irrelevant. Attention meant negotiation. Gen X independence originated here. But so did something deeper. Growing up unseen taught them to become deliberately invisible. They learned to occupy less space, express fewer needs, and resolve problems without acknowledgement. This coping mechanism evolved into permanent personality structure. The latchkey child never stopped needing love. They stopped expecting it. They became adults capable of surviving anything but struggling to request support. Adults who function through pain but cannot accept comfort within it. That's Gen X's foundational narrative. Not privileged, not damaged, but trained from the beginning to minimize their presence. Common perception labels, Gen X emotionally cold. This is inaccurate. Gen X is emotionally compressed. They feel with equal or greater depth than others, but were raised when feelings were treated as inconvenient. Sadness prompted instructions to toughen up. Anxiety was dismissed. Crying was called dramatic. Gen X developed what resembles emotional intelligence, but often functions differently. They learned emotional minimalism, not expressing much, not asking for much, not needing much, at least not out loud. This is why a Gen Xer doesn't usually say, "I'm overwhelmed." They say, "I'm fine." They don't say, "I miss you." They say, "You still alive?" And when they love you, they may not give you poetry, they give you acts of service. They fix your car, they show up when it matters. They handle problems before you even notice them. That's their love language because it feels safer than vulnerability. And sarcasm, that's not cruelty. It's emotional packaging. It's how they share pain without sounding weak. It's how they confess anxiety without making it a big deal. It's how they stay connected while keeping their guard up. Here's the hard truth. Gen X didn't grow up learning how to talk about feelings. They grew up learning how to function through feelings, so they can be emotionally mature and still emotionally unavailable. They can support everyone else while quietly neglecting themselves. Not because they don't care, but because for a long time the rule was simple. Feel it privately. Handle it alone. Move on. Here's the paradox of Gen X. The very trait that made them strong is also the trait that makes them lonely. When you grow up as a latchkey kid, independence isn't a personality choice. It's survival. Your brain learns to scan for problems and solve them fast without making noise, without asking permission, without needing emotional backup. So you become capable, not just responsible, capable in that quiet, almost intimidating way. The kind of person other people lean on when their life falls apart. But hyperindependence comes with a hidden price tag, because at some point, self-reliance stops being a strength and becomes a wall. Gen X didn't learn, I can do this. They learned I have to do this. And that subtle difference rewires everything. It creates adults who feel uncomfortable receiving support even when they desperately need it. Adults who don't vent because venting feels useless. Adults who don't reach out not because they don't care, but because some part of them still believes nobody will come. And over time, that becomes emotional isolation. They're not alone in the loud, obvious way. They can have families, careers, friends, but inside, there's often a quiet loneliness that comes from being the strong one for too long. This is why many Gen Xers struggle with therapy. Not because they reject it, but because vulnerability feels like a foreign language. Their inner child is still whispering the same rule they learned as 8 years old. Handle it! Don't bother anyone. Hyperindependence is a superpower, but if you never learn to be held, it can turn into a private kind of prison. If hyperindependence is the engine of the Gen X psyche, then cynicism is the armor. Because Gen X didn't grow up in an era of trust. They watched institutions crack in real time. Watergate taught them the president could lie. The Cold War taught them tomorrow wasn't guaranteed. The Challenger explosion taught them even the future could fail. Suddenly, publicly, and violently. And then came the 80s. Glossy, loud, aggressively optimistic, while everything underneath felt unstable, Gen X became the first generation raised on non-stop advertising. From Saturday morning cartoons to mall culture, they were marketed to like a captive audience. And over time, their brain adapted. They developed a finely tuned internal alarm system, a VSIT. That's where the famous Gen X attitude comes from. Whatever. But people misunderstand that word. Whatever doesn't mean I don't care. It means I'm not going to give my heart to something that's probably fake. Psychologically, it's emotional self-defense. It's the art of keeping your expectations low enough so disappointment can't break you. Not because you're negative, but because you've been trained by experience. This is why Gen X doesn't trust hype, whether it's a political slogan, a corporate mission statement, or a social media trend promising to change your life in 30 days. They've seen too many promises collapse. So, they don't hope loudly. They don't clap easily. They don't fall for shiny stories. And if you want a Gen Xer to respect you, there's only one language they truly believe in. Authenticity. Not the pretty version. The real one. Because, to Gen X, the ugly truth is comforting. And the beautiful lie is dangerous. Cognitively, Gen X has a rare advantage that no generation before them or after them will ever fully share. They were raised in two different realities. Their childhood was analog, physical, slow, deep. They rode bikes without tracking apps, got lost and had to figure it out. Memorized phone numbers, read maps, lived in a world where boredom existed, and boredom forced creativity. Their brains were wired for patience, for focus, for real-world problem solving. And then, right as they were growing up, the digital revolution hit. Suddenly, it was personal computers, email, dial-up, internet, flip phones, and an entirely new kind of life. And Gen X didn't just witness it, they adapted to it. They learned both languages. That's why Gen X is psychologically bilingual. Boomers often struggle to intuitively trust new technology. Gen Z sometimes struggles to imagine solutions without applications. But Gen X manages both. They can open spreadsheets, reset routers, troubleshoot printers, and still solve problems the old-school way when technology fails. In the workplace, this makes them translators. The glue. People who speak hierarchy and flexibility, professionalism and memes. But there's also a hidden cost nobody talks about. Gen X didn't get to relax into either world. They had to keep updating. They built the digital future while carrying analog responsibilities. They help parents log into accounts while training younger coworkers and systems older than those workers. 2 realities, 2 speeds. 1 nervous system. And that constant switching creates quiet exhaustion Gen X rarely admits. Gen X isn't the loudest generation in the room, but when tasks require completion, they usually complete them. And maybe that's enough. Maybe being understood isn't the goal anymore. Maybe the goal is just to keep going, quietly capable, until it's finally time to rest. If you're Gen X, this probably felt familiar. If you're not, maybe you understand them a little better now. Drop a comment and let me know which part resonated most with you. If you want more deep dives into generational psychology and what makes us tick, subscribe to Lou's Psychology. We're just getting started unpacking the human mind, one generation at a time. Thanks for watching.